Are you ready, Aisha? Should we get started?
Yeah. So hi, welcome everybody. My name is Aisha Salazar. I am with Virginia Cooperative Extension, and I'm a board member of the DC Food Recovery Working Group. So welcome to How the DMV is Rescuing Food, a conversation with local food recovery organizations. The DMV Food Recovery Week is co-hosted by the DC Food Recovery Working Group and Manna Food Center's Community Food Rescue. The DC Food Recovery Working Group comprises a variety of partners from food banks, nonprofits, and for-profits working on food recovery, DC government agencies, local environmental and sustainability organizations and resources, and develops new food recovery advocates. The working group promotes food recovery programs, organizations, and resources, and develops new food recovery partnerships, programs, and resources for Greater DC. Community Food Rescue is a program of Manna Food Center. It is the Coordinated Food Recovery Network of Montgomery County, Maryland. This program enhances the good work of businesses, individuals, and organizations that already recover and redistribute perfectly good food to people experiencing hunger. We also like to thank our media partner, Radio One. So today's event is being recorded. Please feel free to type your questions into the chat box throughout the session, and please keep yourself on mute until our Q&A begins. We will send the slides out to everybody registered via Eventbrite and are posting a link to them on Google Drive I think soon into the chat. We'll be sending a survey about DMV Food Recovery Week in the next couple weeks via Eventbrite, so please look out for it and please take some time to fill it out. We encourage you to post on social media about this event with the hashtag DMV Food Recovery Week, and check out the rest of the week's events at dmvfoodrecoveryweek.org. And you can still register for several events. So today's event is hosted by Food Rescue DC, Community Food Rescue, and Prince William Food Rescue, Virginia Cooperative Extension, and the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments. And Lindsay, I think it's still on presenter view, just so you know. So let's get started with today's discussion. I'm going to introduce, before I do that, this is a map of where the food recovery organizations work. You can see based on the colored regions what areas they're currently working in. So I'm going to first introduce to you Cheryl Collin. She's the program manager for Community Food Rescue, which is a program of Manna Food Center in Montgomery County, Maryland. Cheryl, I'm going to ask you to define some terms for us for today's conversation, because there's some terms that maybe people aren't familiar with. So the four terms I'd like you to discuss if you can. What is food rescue, food recovery, food waste, and food security? We tend to hear these terms, but for those that are new to this type of field, what do those mean?
Sure, thanks so much, Aisha, for hosting this today. Welcome everyone, great to see so many people joining us. So to define terms, first, we often use food rescue and food recovery interchangeably. And it really talks about any surplus unsold food from any licensed food business. And the idea is to be able to redirect it to people who are experiencing hunger. And so food could be rescued or recovered from a grocery store or a farm, a farmer's market, a restaurant, a caterer, or really any kind of institution that has surplus unsold food. Another term that you may be familiar with is food waste. And actually it's that term is really better expressed as wasted food, because it's really the idea of food that could have been used, could have been eaten in some way. Oftentimes food is wasted at all different levels of production and consumption. So really, it could start at the farm. There might be food that is wasted on the farm, in the fields, certainly in manufacturing, also at the wholesale level, the retail level, and certainly us as consumers. And then I also wanted to define the term food insecurity. And there's not one specific definition, but a commonly known definition is really a person or a family that may not know where their next meal is coming from. And the flip side of that, of course, is food security. And the goal would be to achieve food security where all people at all times have access to safe, sufficient, and nutritious food so that we can all lead fulfilling lives.
Great, thank you, Cheryl. I'm going to introduce the rest of our panelists, and then each of them will take a turn to discuss and highlight a little bit of their program and what they've been doing with everything going on. So I introduced Cheryl, and she's going to go first. We also have Kate Urbank. She's the site director for Food Rescue US in DC, and they operate in DC as well as Northern Virginia, specifically Alexandria, Arlington, and Fairfax counties. And then we also have Aaron Tolson joining us, and he is the program director for Prince William Food Rescue based in Prince William County, Virginia. So Cheryl, I'm going to let you go ahead and give your overview.
Great, thanks. So Community Food Rescue is a program of Manna Food Center, which we work in Montgomery County, Maryland. Manna is the largest food bank and food distribution center in Montgomery County. Community Food Rescue was started 6 years ago, really to fill a niche of smaller food donor businesses that might have surplus unsold food, and then directly matching it to food assistance agencies. So over these 6 years, we've created quite a network. Next slide. And the network consists of food donor businesses, food recovery, food assistance organizations, and volunteer food runners. I wanted to give you just a couple of statistics here in Montgomery County and the twin problems of food waste. In Montgomery County, 147 tons of food is food waste of solid food. It represents 23% of Montgomery County's solid waste. And unfortunately, at the same time, 1 out of 12 people in Montgomery County are estimated to be or experience food insecurity. And that was pre-pandemic. Now, we estimate 1 out of 8 people are experiencing hunger. Next slide. So as I mentioned, Community Food Rescue has created quite a network. We now have well over 800 members representing food donor businesses of all kinds, food assistance organizations, and volunteers who deliver food directly. And you can see a map of Montgomery County with the different connections that we have made. And this map has actually increased since we last developed it. Next slide. The way in which we match food is we use a software program. It's called Chow Match. It matches folks within the network in a virtual food hub situation. So a donor will post any surplus unsold food that they have. Chow Match will match it to one of the organizations in our network, and then the food run is made available. Emails are sent out to our volunteer food runners, and the first food runner to accept the food run gets it. And then all 3 parties are confirmed, and the food run goes. And it happens 24/7 and every day of the year. Next slide. Once we got the basic program under our belts, and we have the matching program, we developed food safety guidelines that are specifically for recovered food. We have a recognition program, a detailed website for all things that deal with food recovery. And when we established our basic program, we kept thinking about new ways that we could utilize food before it went to waste. And one of the things that we started 3 years ago was Community Food Rescue Cooks. And that is where we've enlisted the volunteer help of professional chefs from Marriott, from Hilton, from other locations. And we partnered with a nonprofit volunteer group called Kind Works. And we were able to also partner with the Silver Spring United Methodist Church. So we would bring food in from the Manna warehouse, fresh produce that was better eaten cooked rather than fresh. It was toward the end of its lifespan. And the chefs would be incredibly creative with being able to come up with delicious, nutritious tasting meals and utilizing really just the food from the Manna warehouse. So we would spend 3 hours, cook this food into amazing meals, and then it would get donated to one of our network food assistance organizations, particularly those who are serving hot meals but do not have cooking facilities. Next slide. Another way that we're able to rescue food before it's wasted is to partner with the Montgomery County Extension Service and Master Gardeners to glean food from local farms. So at the end of the harvest season, when the commercial harvest is done, but there is still food in the fields, we will go in with a crew of volunteers and harvest. In this case, you're seeing strawberries at the end of the strawberry season, the spring. Harvest strawberries, and we've harvested blueberries, apples, sweet potato greens, things like that. And then again, those get packaged up and then delivered to either schools when schools used to be open, and now to food assistance organizations. Next slide. So obviously the world has changed since COVID hit, and we have changed along with that to really accommodate and meet the needs of our participants at Manna. One of the things that we've done is we've expanded Community Food Rescue to offer home deliveries to Manna participants who should not be going out during COVID. So we now deliver a box of shelf-stable food, a box of fresh produce, and a bag of frozen meat as part of the Food for Families program that Manna has always provided to its participants. Since the very end of March, we've been able to make over 1,700 home deliveries utilizing volunteers. Next slide. And another way we've been able to expand our operations during COVID is to expand Manna's Farm to Food Bank program and participate in the Montgomery County Farm to Food Bank program. And thanks to the Montgomery County Food Security Task Force and the Food Council and the Office of Agriculture, we've been able to partner. Manna has received grant money to buy local produce from local farms, and then we've been able to distribute it through our volunteers to our food assistance organizations, as well as to Manna clients. And next slide. So just to sum up, in our 6 years of operations, we have rescued and distributed 7 million pounds of food. That represents about 5.8 million meals. We have 838 CFR network members, and we would invite anyone who is interested in helping to volunteer in Montgomery County to check out our website and sign up. And I'll stop there for now.
Great, thank you, Cheryl. Next, we're going to have Kate Urbank speak a bit about her organization and the work that she does. Please remember to put in your questions into the chat, and then we'll get to those a little bit later on. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. So I represent the Food Rescue US site in DC and Northern Virginia. We are part of a national organization that was founded in 2011 up in Connecticut, where I was from, and I was a volunteer for them, actually. And when I moved back to DC, looking for a food rescue program in the district to be able to volunteer for, determined that there wasn't one. And so with the help of the DC Food Recovery Working Group, which had just formed, we explored a way to bring a food rescue program to DC. And now there are 33 locations around the country, and we're growing. And we do have a proprietary app that we developed and upkeep, and we're about to launch version 3. And for those of our food rescuers on the phone, on the Zoom, there will definitely be hiccups as we transfer over, but it's got some new features that will really, really improve things going forward. So yes, we have been up and running for about 4 years this October. And basically the way we operate is we engage potential food donors to register in the app. Either I encourage them to register or I see that they've registered themselves. Same thing with our receiving agencies or partner agencies, as we call them. And then there's our volunteers that we call food rescuers. So our program kind of has gone out as far, we do not, out of respect to the good work, obviously, that Community Food Rescue and Cheryl are doing in Montgomery County, we don't operate there, but we have been operating wherever else we grow. As long as I see somebody in the app who is nearby a place where I know we have a donor and there are agencies in need, we just continue to populate out. So, but pretty much for now, we're operating in DC, Northern Virginia, and parts of Prince George's County with an expectation that we'll do a little growth there as well. So we are, I have many volunteers, over 1,100 volunteers, but I'll be honest, not all of them have done food rescues. We're trying to, it's tough to necessarily get rescues that are convenient in people's backyards. So we're working to grow, but we have probably 300, 400 people who are quite active. And these are pictures of some of them. We work with about 120 agencies. I would say we have about 300 food donors. And what the distinction about Food Rescue US in DC is that we kind of have found a niche, although that was pre-COVID, of doing food recovery from corporate cafeterias, because prepared food is kind of its own animal. It has advantages because it's really helpful to bring to a soup kitchen that they can heat up and serve. But not every place will take prepared food. But we have found that our food rescuers get that job done, and with the assistance of DC Central Kitchen, who have they were doing some prepared food recovery, but once Food Rescue US got on its feet, we kind of were partnering with them, and they now refer most of the prepared food to the Food Rescue US program. So in addition, we do farmers markets, small mom and pop grocery stores, given that the Capital Area Food Bank does a great deal of the larger grocery stores. We work with caterers, which is great. Some restaurants, at least in our experience, tend not to be the biggest food donors. They oftentimes cook to order. Sometimes we'll get food from their walk-in if they had like a double order accidentally of something. There are some places like our We the Pizza franchise that have prepared food out every night up until close. And so they do save it overnight, and we're able to do food recovery from those organizations. So yeah, we are, our troop of volunteers is remarkable. We're it's funny, we haven't met, but lately we've been doing some Zoom calls. It's been a wonderful opportunity to kind of see face to face some of the people that have been out there doing remarkable work for us for so long. So yeah, that's the Food Rescue US program. And this is how you can reach us. And we finally got t-shirts and masks, and that makes us feel good when we're out getting some attention out in the community. And I do want to say briefly, I mentioned COVID. I don't know if we're going to talk about that later. Given that so many of the corporate cafeterias have closed, that has really caused us to have a major pivot. One thing we did was, as they were closing down, we did considerable clean out of walk-ins, freezers. We're still doing it in some places, because in the beginning it seemed we were closing down for 2 weeks to flatten the curve. Then it was, they went a little deeper with more perishable items. And now we are honestly, just the other day, we cleaned out a freezer with a corporation and picked up $6,000 worth of meats and fish. So it will be interesting to see what happens as some of these corporations reopen. And I expect that the days of massive pans of excess food from a corporate cafeteria are potentially behind us for a while, but we are finding other ways to discover and recover excess food. And yeah, I welcome you all of those of you in DC and Northern Virginia to join the program. Thank you for this.
Thanks, Kate. You actually touched on a question that I will ask a little bit later and ask you all to expand some more on. So thank you for that great overview. Erin, you will be next. And Erin is again with the Prince William County Food Rescue.
Thanks, Aisha, and thanks to everybody that's on the Zoom meeting with us today. This is something we've been doing here in Prince William County for just a little over a year. And what led to this was like the others is trying to figure out what do we do to minimize wasted food and minimize hunger simultaneously. And the issue has always been, how do you get the food from a donor to a distribution site? The donors, they don't have the desire or willingness to pay employees to move extra food. It's easier for them just to throw it away. And then on the distribution side, you have the food pantries, the senior centers, et cetera, who don't have the volunteer power to go pick up the food. So in researching, found that there's a lot of different ways people are trying to minimize food waste and hunger throughout the U.S. and throughout the world. This is a global problem. And I think all of us on this call have settled with an app-based technology as the best way to be able to mobilize people in the community, to help each other out, to rescue food and reduce hunger simultaneously. The other benefit is that by removing perishable items that would end up in the landfill rotting, that would be creating methane gas. And so instead of food being thrown out, creating methane gas, hurting our environment, we're now redirecting that food to distribution sites who can immediately feed people with that food. And so it's a win-win all the way around. We in Prince William County work with about 70 active distribution sites. I think we have 110. Again, part of that pivot because of COVID was all of the smaller pantries that had to close. We're seeing some of them start to reopen, and in the process, and we'll talk about this more later, move from just doing rescues to also doing redistribution. So I'll talk about that a little bit later. But on the next slide, it's got just kind of an idea of what our app looks like. We use the Food Rescue Hero technology. This was created by 412 Food Rescue out of Pittsburgh. And so like the others, it's app-based. You can claim rescues, and it takes about 45 minutes to complete a rescue. You can do it at your leisure when you're available. If you're not available, you just kind of skip it, but the first person to claim it, it's theirs, and they're able to complete a rescue. The next slide just has some photos, or next two slides just has some photos of, Food Rescue Heroes. We've got, families, individuals, sometimes it's truckloads, sometimes it's carloads. The next slide. And so you can just see that, it doesn't take much. We obviously have quite a few people with trucks, but we also have people with smart cars who come, and we figured out exactly how to pack just enough, boxes into their cars. So it really is a way for anybody in the community to participate and make a difference. I think I have one more slide yet. The bottom right slide is the warehouse we're operating out of now with Prince William County as part of our COVID disaster response to mitigate hunger throughout Prince William County. And again, look forward to talking about that a little bit more later.
Great, thank you to all of you for presenting an overview of your organizations and the excellent work you guys are doing. Related to COVID, we'll just talk about that now since it seems like a lot of people have interest in that. Maybe if you can share some of your experiences. I think it's Joanne, is that how you pronounce your name? Had a great question in there. I don't know if you want to ask it yourself. If not, I can ask it for you. Is it Joanne or Joan?
Joanne.
Okay, go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, it's for all the panels. What are the effects during the COVID in your operations, particularly like volunteers, volume, beneficiaries, and did your I guess as far as beneficiaries, did that get expanded to more, and also like did the demand increase?
And I can repeat that just in case. Thank you, Joanne, for asking that question. So what are the effects during COVID in your operations, volunteers, or beneficiaries? And did the demand increase as a result? Does anybody want to tackle that first?
Yes, it did. I know we've all been having these conversations together for months now, but yeah, the demand has definitely increased. I think in Prince William County it was about, and through our food pantries, have gone up as much as 400% from pre-COVID to where we are right now, and we're continuing to see the numbers rise. And like I was saying before, we pivoted from just doing rescues from the grocery stores and the restaurants and farmers markets to now working with the USDA Farmers to Families Food Box program. So now we're getting in large amounts of prepackaged foods, and we're also buying in bulk quantity non-perishable items and creating our own non-perishable boxes, and working with Capillary Food Bank, who's also providing us some of their non-perishable boxes. So we went pre-COVID from doing about 250 rescues a month and moving about 45,000 pounds of food. We're currently doing a little over 300 rescues a week and moving about 380,000 pounds of food a week. So that's the difference we've seen from pre-COVID to where we are now. So we're moving about 2 million pounds a month of food out, and that's just throughout Prince William County.
Sorry, can you repeat those numbers? I think those are some big changes there.
A little bit. Yeah, we went from 250 rescues a week and about 250 rescues a month and 45,000 pounds of food a month to now we're doing over 300 rescues a week and moving about 380,000 plus pounds of food every week. Same with the others. We saw a huge uptick in the amount of volunteers downloading our app and participating as food rescue heroes. We had, I think, about 1,000 downloads before COVID, and within the next 2 months, it had doubled to over 2,000 downloads of the app.
Great, thanks. Kate?
Yeah, I'll speak to, we have had about 350 new volunteers sign up since COVID. So we too have had, in the beginning, there were some people that absolutely felt that food rescue was the best way that they could do something when people really wanted to do something. And we had CDC protocol in place, and we were able to do no contact pick up and drop off. But it was really important to people to be able to be out and do something. One other program that we introduced in DC was a restaurant meal program where either Food Rescue US would get a grant in order to allow us to bolster restaurants that were at risk of closing by buying meals that we would then redistribute, as Erin was suggesting, different than rescue. We also had a really neat story of a caterer that got a PPP grant. So they were funded by the government to stay open and pay for labor, but they didn't really know what to do other than they decided to make meals for us for free. So 600 meals a week came from this Quick Step Catering, which was just a real blessing. It was really in the beginning, and it was a quick way to be able to say to people, yes, we can get you meals. So, and we're doing some of the food box distribution. It's every week has a slightly different flavor, but it's been really heartening to see the volunteers remain so engaged.
Yeah, and I'll share some of the similar experiences that we've experienced during the beginning of COVID that Kate mentioned, is that a lot of our food donor businesses had to shut their doors immediately. And so, our phone was ringing off the hook with those kinds of requests and having to move a lot of food very quickly, perishable food. And they needed to close their doors today. So, come out today kind of thing. So that really took a big effort initially. I've mentioned to you that we pivoted to incorporate home deliveries, and that has been a really interesting operation to start from scratch. And the reason why Manna wanted to do it through Community Food Rescue is that we already had the established app Chow Match that we use that could, with a little bit of modification, we were quickly able to, instead of directing food to agencies, we were now able to match volunteers with Manna participants. And so that continues every day. We do up to about 30 home deliveries every day with volunteers. We saw a huge uptick in our volunteers, similar to Kate's. We probably have had well over 500 new volunteers since COVID started. So more than doubled our volunteer pool because of COVID. And then I mentioned to you the Montgomery County Farm to Food Bank program. We're currently in phase 1, which is to really help local farmers who had produce in the field already, and because restaurants and institutions have closed, they didn't have a market for this produce. So again, thanks to a grant through the Food Security Task Force, Montgomery County, Manna was able to purchase food from local farmers, and then we're helping to ship that to, direct that to food assistance organizations. Phase 2 of this Farm to Food Bank program, which is now happening and will be implemented next spring, is that farmers are invited to submit proposals for grants on how to expand their infrastructure, to extend their growing season, and to make more food available. And so we hope then that into next spring and next growing season, we're going to continue the Farm to Food Bank program, continue hopefully to pay farmers for their food. And we see this kind of as a longer term venture.
Great. So it sounds like a lot of you have had some really great established partnerships to allow for you to cause some of this pivoting. Can you speak a little bit about that, and then also a little bit more about the funding piece and how that's changed in part because of COVID? I don't know if anybody wants to expand on what they said, and I think Kate, you also mentioned earlier that you worked with some restaurants that did close, or not restaurants necessarily, but corporate or businesses that had closed. So has your food, type of food that you provide, shifted? I think you mentioned that.
Yeah, I noticed there was a question about whether we work with corporate cafeterias in Northern Virginia, which we do quite a bit. That was, Hilton, Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae, Boeing, some of our best, some of our biggest donors. And I mentioned before that we went through a transition where we were helping them to dwindle down their existing stocks. Some of them are starting to reopen again, which is, but they're opening in a different manner. We actually rescued, I guess, about 60 coffee pots, formal coffee makers from the Flick Hospitality, because they're no longer thinking that people will, it's going to be individual coffee. So in addition to food, we sometimes rescue machinery because of COVID. I mean, things are really changing. But yeah, it's heartening whenever I see some of our corporations coming back online, and they're not coming back as big, but we rescue whatever they have. As far as funding, it's a lot of grant writing. People have been generous. If they couldn't do a food rescue, some folks didn't feel comfortable going out, but they thought they wanted to make a donation. So we've been blessed by having people, rise to that occasion for us. But it's always a challenge.
I'll jump in and talk about some of the, pretty incredible ways in which some of our partners have stepped up. Some of the chefs that we worked with through CFR Cooks, when that program or that project had to stop because of COVID, some of the chefs were unfortunately furloughed from their hotels, and yet they were just wanting to cook, and some actually cooked from home. And while we couldn't accept that food through Community Food Rescue because of food safety considerations, because food wasn't made in a commercial kitchen, some of the food assistance organizations were happy to accept this incredibly wonderfully prepared food. So we had one particular chef from Marriott able to go into the Manna warehouse and take some of that, again, produce that might not be good to eat fresh, but on its last legs, take some of the shelf stable food and then transform it into amazing meals, and cooked 4 days a week, every week throughout the spring and summer, and was able to supply the Montgomery County Coalition for the Homeless Shelter with meals 4 days a week, which was just pretty incredible. And in terms of funding, we've been very fortunate to have good county funding, again, that has come down through the Montgomery County Food Security Task Force. Manna supporters have been very generous in helping out individually and through other corporate donations. Our amazing volunteers have really stepped up, as Kate was mentioning, you know, when COVID hit, and I think a lot of people were at home and wanted to do something, they just signed up in droves. It was just amazing. Before the pandemic, we would normally see about, 7 volunteers sign up a month. And then in 1 month, we had 150 volunteers sign up. So we were, at one point in the early pandemic days, we were overwhelmed with volunteers. We had more volunteers than we had food runs. And of course, that balances out over time. So yeah, every week, every month seems to be a little bit of changing direction, pivoting where the needs are. Manna has seen an uptick in 34% more households have been served through Manna compared to the same period last year. So that just gives you a sense of how many more people are coming to Manna to receive food.
In Prince William County, there were definitely some partnerships that changed because of COVID and some additional funding. Going to a redistribution model that happened through a partnership with Prince William County's Emergency Management Office. So as part of their COVID disaster response as a county, food was a part of that. They just didn't have an actual plan of what they wanted to do to ensure that there was food available to the food pantries who could stay open at the time. Because of our app and the logistics and the relationships that we had, they tasked us to lead the Community Feeding Task Force. And so with that came a great partnership with Prince William County, Volunteer Prince William, which is an organization that manages volunteers for the county for disasters in particular. Volunteer Prince William helped stand up a food helpline that's manned by volunteers Monday through Friday with bilingual staff. We worked with the county's GIS department to create a map of where all the food distribution sites were, including all the schools throughout Prince William County that were distributing food. And then a partnership with Caballero Food Bank. This program is a part of ACTS, which is Action and Community Through Service, a nonprofit that's been in the community for 50 years and had a relationship with Caballero Food Bank, but this was something other. And Caballero Food Bank has been fantastic at working with us and helping us get extra food in as needed so that we can get it out into the community. So those were 3 major partnerships. Additionally, the county gave us about $1 million in CARES funding just to purchase food. While we were getting all this perishable items from the USDA's Farmers to Families Food Box program, we realized that non-perishable items were still an issue and that a lot of our food banks, because of the increase in demand, their shelves were just being run empty. And the other problem is that the food supply chain had completely broken down. And if you wanted to go to the store and buy items to donate to your food pantry, you couldn't do that anymore. You were limited on what you were able to buy if it was even on the shelf. So there was just a whole backlog of issues. So with the funding, we've been able to work to buy bulk non-perishable items, not only to build boxes that can go out in the community along with the perishable items, but also to help our food pantries restock their shelves. So there's been a lot of different things that we've had to do, and it takes money to do that. And so we've had the county, but we've also had communities that have done fundraisers and drives to raise funds in order to support the community as it relates to food. And then we've also pivoted with Volunteer Prince William and the Food Helpline, like Cheryl, to do no contact direct deliveries throughout Prince William County. Again, using our app as the logistics for that. And so I think we're closing on about 1,000 no contact direct deliveries just through the helpline since April. And then we also provide about 200 no contact direct deliveries to shut-in seniors from 2 different food banks in Prince William County. So that's another major shift for us here in Prince William County. And then there was a question before I move on. Have any volunteers in Prince William County had difficulties using the Food Rescue Hero tech? We've had little hiccups here and there, especially early on with the app and working with 412, but they've been fantastic at all of our back-end issues. Every once in a while, if they're in the middle of an update, we'll have a little bit of a hiccup, but for the most part, no. The technology is very easy to use. I think it's the same across for all the other platforms that are represented here today. And so it works very well, very easy to use, very user friendly.
Great, thank you guys for that valuable input in terms of all the partnerships, the unique challenges you've had to deal with in the situation. Stacy had some good questions in here. Stacy, I don't know if you wanted to ask first the one about community gardens, and then you had a question about regulations that I was hoping you could mention.
Okay, yeah, I'll be happy to ask those. So one of my questions was, are any of you working with school, community, or other gardens to rescue any surplus produce they have, or are their yields just kind of too small?
I'll jump in. We were contacted, I guess this spring, early summer, by a new group that calls itself Harvest Share. And this was a brainchild of a master gardener who just said, you know, what can I be doing during COVID? And she wanted to organize both community gardens and also people who were gardening in their backyards, and what could they do to aggregate smaller amounts of produce and then redirect it to shelters. So that really just got started because of COVID. And we have helped them to figure out where their little hubs are for gathering small amounts of produce. And in some cases, it's just on people's front porches. People leave out coolers, and they bring their backyard produce, or if it's a community garden, and then food is aggregated and then transported to a food assistance organization. So we thought early on that Community Food Rescue would be the transportation for that, and we worked closely with them early on. But as it turned out, the people who were volunteering to do this wanted to transport food to the agencies directly. So we helped them with locating some agencies throughout Montgomery County, and they're doing it independently. So it's not actually run through Community Food Rescue at this point, but it's happening in Montgomery County. It's really exciting to see.
Real briefly, there's I'm trying to find the name of it, a group out in Denver that has an app that is, they're trying to introduce to DC, and I keep trying to find somebody who can take that on, which is specifically to work with backyard gardens. Yes, Fresh Food Connect. Thank you. Stacy, are you with Fresh Food? No. Are you with Fresh Food Connect? Anyway, and I'm
No, I'm doing it for the Food Council, the Fairfax Food Council.
I was trying to remember, but exactly. And I think it's a lovely idea. It's not something that Food Rescue US can take on. We also really work with businesses donating to nonprofits. So we have some structure around, sometimes I get a call, and off the record, not through the app, but I refer people to where they might be able to make donations that is not through Food Rescue US. But I really am intrigued by the idea of trying to kind of let backyard farmers know how they can transfer their excess produce before their squash become, 6 feet long. So it's a goal, but we're in communications.
So in Prince William County, we do. There is pretty much no donation that's too small. And last year, before COVID shut all of our schools down, we had worked with Prince William County's school system to bring a USDA-approved program to create food share tables in the schools, being done out in California. And so we have resources, videos, supply list, everything for a school to start a food share table in order to minimize food waste from the students. And then we would rescue at the end of the day, or at the end of the last lunch period, we would rescue that food, the unopened, unused food, and get it to a nearby distribution partner. So we were doing that, and we've heard from our schools that once they reopen, whenever that is, they're ready to start that back up again.
So Erin, you actually asked a good question, or made me think of something. Now with the schools that, school meals have been extended to 2021, the free and reduced meals, are you guys starting to see that happen again? Like individuals that just get too much milk or too many products from the schools that they won't eat, and then are they trying to donate to you all?
Yes.
Okay, so you do accept that kind of food, just asking.
Yes. Sometimes we'll just also, I think like Kate said, we'll just kind of redirect them to a nearby food pantry based on where they live because it's easier that way. But we are working with the school system for any larger stuff that they may need to move until the schools open up again.
Great, thanks. So this kind of ties into another question that Stacey had about safety. What regulations or licensing do you have to follow to distribute prepared food? I don't know if Cheryl, Kate, or Aaron want to speak to that. And I know, Kate, I think you're familiar with a Harvard document that was provided for DC.
There is, for those of you unfamiliar, an overriding law called the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Food Donation Act of 1996, which is a law that was passed in order to encourage food donation. And it's a very broad law. As long as a business is donating food in good faith, even if somebody might become sickened by it, there's no liability. And we talk about this as being a law that has never been tested, which some people think means it's strong. Other people think you don't want to be the first one to have it tested. So recently, the City Council in DC passed the Save Good Food Act, which is something that our Food Recovery Working Group was advocating for. And it strengthens some protections. There's this, so that it enhances protection. It's all detailed without going into too much detail. In the Harvard did a guide, their food access group did a guide, legal guide about food donation in DC with some breakout information about Maryland and Virginia. So it's a pretty comprehensive guide, and it's Lindsay has put it up in the chat, and it kind of elaborates about food safety. I know that Cheryl has, I believe signing up in Cheryl's app, you go through a quiz that one goes through to make sure that certain food safety protocol is being learned and monitored. And maybe Cheryl can speak to that. We do not have that. We just kind of give good guidance through the Bill Emerson Act. But I'd be curious for Cheryl to elaborate about some of the food safety advice that your volunteers learn about.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Kate. When we first started Community Food Rescue, the first thing that we did was we worked with our Department of Health and Human Services. We created a comprehensive guide, food safety guidelines for all of our participants in Community Food Rescue. And that was actually one of the things that our stakeholders asked for. They wanted a uniform set of guidelines. So we wrote these guidelines. They're on the communityfoodrescue.org website for all to see and borrow and use. We're happy to share. And because ServSafe protocols don't really address recovered food, we had to create food safety guidelines specifically for recovered food. So we worked in tandem with our health department to create those. We also created videos to show people, whether you're in the role of a food donor, a food recipient organization, or a food runner, what you need to do to participate in Community Food Rescue. As Kate was mentioning, we specifically needed to train our volunteers on food safety, handling, and transportation. So we require our volunteers to review the food safety guidelines online, review these short videos online, and then in the process of signing up to use the Chow Match software, we've incorporated a 20-question multiple choice quiz on food safety, and all volunteers have to pass it with 80% or better. And once they do, their account automatically becomes active. If they don't pass, they're encouraged to go back, review, and take the quiz again.
Great, thank you all for touching on some of those important points that maybe not everybody was aware of. I think there was a question, or one thing we wanted to ask was just if you guys could share a volunteer story or some sort of story that encompasses the work that you do, or whether it's a volunteer, your programs, your partners, yourself, if you guys could share that.
I'll tell a story about, I think that sometimes people don't appreciate how much a business might want to donate food, but given that the three of us are busy all day making these arrangements so it can happen, it shouldn't always be on the business to have to figure out how to make that donation happen. So I want to give a shout out to one of our chefs, a woman, Shorna, who's with Flick Hospitality out at Freddie Mac, who, we probably text each other 3 times a day these days, because she will go through every cabinet, every walk-in, to make sure that every bit of food that they could possibly donate is donated to us. And she, imagine the pain of having perfectly good food scraped into the trash. So it's just really important to kind of honor the fact that the food donors, they go the extra mile, they make an effort to make sure that food is able to be rescued. And I really value that partnership with our donors.
Thank you. Cheryl or Aaron, do you want to share anything?
Yeah, sure. I've got just 2 quick stories. One is from the side of doing the no contact direct deliveries through the Volunteer Prince William Food Helpline. Is 2 adults, Allison in her 80s, and her son Tyler on disability. And when COVID hit, he lost his job, which was the income for their home. So when Tyler called the food helpline, we were able to coordinate and get food no contact direct delivered. Obviously, they weren't going to be leaving the home with their health issues. And then we were able to connect them to a resource to be able to receive more regularly help through the senior delivery program. But for Tyler, this made a huge difference for him, not having to worry about his mom not having enough food in the house, especially at her age with her condition. So that was kind of a cool story. And we hear from our food helpline folks all the time about the great work that's being done. But then on a volunteer side, one of the things that we were doing through our warehouse operation with the Community Feeding Task Force is sending out box trucks of pallets of produce to some of our larger distribution sites. And we had a off-duty police officer and his son, 10-year-old son, who would come and whenever he could and drive a truck as a way to give back in the community. And he loved the opportunity to bond with his son during this time. His son loved it. He came in, he would help put boxes together while we were getting the truck loaded up, and then he and his dad would take off and deliver food throughout the community. And just to see that opportunity and that interaction between a father and son and an off-duty police officer getting back his time in the community was just very, very special for us.
And I wanted to share a story about our volunteers. When we started doing home deliveries, part of the volunteers' task is to go back into the ChowMatch software and complete the status of their food run. So we know that the food run has been done. And in that format, we ask volunteers also to write notes, and if there's some issues or an address change or whatever, we note that there. But volunteers have also been able to give us incredible insights into what these home deliveries have meant, both for the Manna participants and also for themselves as volunteers. So same as Aaron, when we talked about no contact deliveries, and we instruct our volunteers to literally, drop the food at their front door, ring the doorbell, and go. When volunteers are back in their cars, oftentimes participants will come out, they'll express their appreciation with a social distance wave or a bow, or they might even mouth, thank you, which is very sweet. We've also asked our volunteers to call or text participants so that food is taken in as soon as possible. So as soon as they drop the food. So in some cases, volunteers and participants have been able to find a chance to make a verbal contact and connection, and again, offer appreciation. But one volunteer named Dina shared a conversation with a participant after she delivered food. And of course, Dina was masked and at a safe distance. And I'm gonna read what Dina wrote. She said, Ms. P seemed in great need of a bit of human connection and conversation. She spoke of her loneliness, her isolation, anxiety, and despair. She also told me that she shares her Manna food with her neighbors, many of whom are in desperate straits. Dina says, I see these food deliveries as an opportunity to look in on our neighbors and let them know that they are not alone. And I was just like very blown away by those comments. So we hear these comments every day, and it's incredible.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, sorry, I'm trying to like not be affected by everything you guys just said. So we don't have much time left. If there's anything that you want to say as a last comment, ways that people can get involved. There was a quick question in there about you know, whether or not people can be involved in volunteer opportunities such as administration, accounting, or other areas, fundraising. You know, just let us know and put some of the information to the chat as well. So.
Hey, Aisha, can I just add one more thing too? This is Stacey Evers with the Fairfax Food Council, and I just wanted to let everyone know that one of our events next week is a town hall on October 21st at 7 p.m. and it's with local elected officials. I think we have Arlington, Fairfax County, Fairfax City, Falls Church City, and it's a great time. They're going to talk about their vision for urban ag and their vision for food distribution and food in the area, and it would be a great time if you all have any questions to really be able to talk directly to local leaders about, at least if you're in Northern Virginia, about things that could support you better or challenges that you've been facing.
Thank you, Stacey. Yes. And I did mention in there, there's still time to register for other events if you go to dmvfoodrecoveryweek.org. But thank you all for joining us, and please get involved with any of these organizations, or if you're not from the area, a local organization where you live. Any last remarks from the presenters? No? Okay, great. Thank you all. Have a great day.
Thank you.